Well, we're joined now by Senator Elizabeth Warren on the 8th anniversary of the failure of Lehman Brothers to talk about bank and financial regulation and Dodd-Frank. And Senator Warren, thanks for joining us on Fox Business once again. Let's first talk about Donald Trump, who's just finished up a speech on the economy today. He has called for less regulation. He didn't specifically mention repealing Dodd-Frank.
Yeah, today's not the day for that, probably.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a moment. But he also has called for restoring Glass-Steagall, which is something that you want to do.
Yeah.
So my question is that could you work with a President Trump and find some common ground with him on some of these issues?
Look, anytime there's something that advances the economic interests of hardworking middle-class families, I'll work with anyone. The problem I've got right now with Donald Trump on this is that Donald Trump is on record saying he would repeal Dodd-Frank. And I think he said first day of a Trump presidency, it's gone. And that includes the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is the little bureau that's been set up now for 5 years, and that exposed this whole Wells Fargo fraud. So if Donald Trump had his way, that little agency wouldn't be there. Wells Fargo would still be cheating its customers, and you and I wouldn't know anything about it.
And now the CEO of Wells Fargo, John Stumpf, is going to be coming up to the Senate Banking Committee, of which you're a member, to testify next week. What do you plan to ask him?
Well, I want to ask him, look, we only have 5 minutes, so I would like to ask him a whole lot of things. But I really want to ask him about what exactly has gone wrong at Wells Fargo. Is this a case of a bank that is so giant that you really can't manage it? You can't tell when 5,200 of your employees are cheating your customers, when they're opening more than 2 million checking accounts and credit cards without permission of the employees and generating millions of dollars in fees, that you can't even manage this place? If that's the case, this is a bank that's too big to manage, and it should be broken up. Or alternative, did you actually know? In which case, there's some personal responsibility here that we need to talk about.
And on that point, do you think that as a result of this, John Stumpf should quit or be fired by his board?
You know, I got to tell you, I just don't get how there's no responsibility. So here they fire thousands of low-level employees, the people actually on the line who've been squeezed by their management to get out and sell. The people who preside over this widespread law-breaking within the agency just keep collecting their bonuses.
What should happen? What do you
there needs to be accountability. You shouldn't be able.
Now we know that several U.S. attorneys have launched criminal investigations,
and they should. But it's also that there's got to be personal accountability. It's not enough to say, "Oh, the bank is going to pay a fine." We need to hold people personally responsible. That's the only way we're ever going to get change.
So heads should roll, including John Stumpf, potentially?
I don't understand how he answers the question. Either you didn't know, in which case there's a problem, or you did know, in which case there's a problem. Yeah. He was responsible.
Okay, so you'll wait to see how this all plays out.
Let's see how it plays out.
Okay. And speaking of prosecuting banks, you released this morning letters to the Inspector General of the Justice Department and to the Director of the FBI, Mr. Comey. What are those letters about? Okay,
so remember, following the 2008 crash, we got in place a Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, and God bless them, they went out and they brought in tons of testimony. They looked at financial records, they poured through everything, and they issued this huge report about what had gone wrong during the financial crisis. They then, as was required by law, sealed up all their other stuff, sent it over to the archives to be opened 5 years later.
The National Archives.
That's right, the National Archives.
Yeah. And they just released it in March.
They just released it, and we started digging through the papers. And in the papers, it turns out that this Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, the ones that had gathered all this data, had recommended to the Justice Department that they prosecute both CEOs and CFOs of some of these large financial institutions and the large financial institutions themselves. In other words, they said there is ample data here, ample information, evidence to suggest that federal laws have been broken. So they give this to the Justice Department. They name names. This is not a vague go after them. They name names, and essentially nothing ever happened. So I sent a letter to the Inspector General, and I said to the Inspector General, what happened to each one of those referrals? That's what I want to hear.
But this was during the Obama administration under Eric Holder,
Yes.
The Attorney General, former Attorney General. And as you know, he's the one that testified to Congress that asked this very question: why weren't there any prosecutions of big banks and some top officials? He's the one that suggested they were too big to jail.
I remember.
Did the Obama administration drop the ball here? Is that what you're saying?
Look, for me, this is not about politics. This is about the failure to have real accountability following this financial crisis. And I also want to put one other piece in here. There were two letters. One to the Inspector General of the Justice Department, but the other one to the head of the FBI. You know, the rule has long been, their practice has long been, that the FBI, if there's no indictment, they don't say anything more. They don't release any of their notes, they don't release any of their investigation materials, and they don't stand up and make any public comments other than to say there's no indictment here. However, in the case of Hillary Clinton, with her emails, Director Comey released a lot of information. He had a long press conference about it, and he came down to Congress and testified about it. And his standard for doing this, he said there is intense public interest. Those were his words. And he said, and when there's intense public interest, you don't have to follow the usual rules. The rule is going to be complete transparency. That's what he wanted, transparency. My view is there is intense public interest over who caused the financial crisis of 2008 that cost millions of Americans their homes, their jobs, their savings. Okay. And so I want him to do the same thing here. I want him to reveal the documents, I want to see those notes, and I want him to hold a press conference. I want him to come down to Congress and testify.
All right. Senator Warren, unfortunately we're out of time, but thanks for joining us again today.
It's good to see you.
All right, good to see you.